Okay, welcome everybody. It is Wednesday, and that means it's time at 7:30 Pacific time PM to talk Real Hawk Talk with the fellas. I am Brian Emhauser, at Hawk Blogger on Twitter, and I'm joined as always by Evan Hill at Evan Hill SEA over there in Scottsdale. How you doing, Evan?
Good. It's good to be back. I'm sorry I missed last week. You guys had some good shows without me, so excited to jump back in.
Well, we were happy to have you spend some time with the PODE, and hopefully that show went really well for you guys.
It did.
Cool. And then also Real Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons up there in Toronto. He's got a gleaming new computer that is coming to you in crystal clear HD quality. So welcome, Jeff.
What's going on? You guys I just listened to your show Sunday. I couldn't make that one, but that was a really interesting game. The new computers got me hyped, so a lot more hyped than that game. So
yeah,
let's talk about tonight.
Yeah, we'll talk about that game a little bit. We did have the post game show, but let's spend a little time recapping since you guys weren't part of the post game show. What were some of your top level takeaways from that game? Like how did you enter that game and how did you exit the game? What were the biggest changes? And Jeff, maybe let's start with you.
I thought you guys did a good job covering just like the hype trains that kind of got slowed down after they played a tougher level of competition. The Vikings are a really good team. The only thing really holding them back is a quarterback. And guys like Marquise Blair and Jazz Ferguson, guys we were kind of beaming about, even Paxton Lynch to an extent before he got hurt. They just looked like radically different players against a better team. From a Seahawks perspective, I think the biggest thing that we've talked about so many times on this show is just the secondary. The secondary doesn't look good at all. And right now, it doesn't seem like Blair's ready to play as a starter yet. He's got back problems right now. But between the big plays that are given up by the corners, the lack of playmaking from anyone other than McDougald last year, and the secondary, like a group that Pete specializes in, they don't look good. And I don't see any reason why they will all of a sudden. So I'm not. That's almost my biggest fear surrounding the team, and that jumped out last week.
How about you, Evan? What were your top takeaways from that game?
Yeah, really two things stood out to me, both on the defensive side of the ball. Shaquille Griffin is somebody we've talked a lot about on this podcast. Had a pretty decent rookie year. We feel like had a pretty big sophomore slump. Gave up a long pass to Adam Thielen in the game in which Jeff mentioned. That's like the cardinal rule for Pete Carroll defenses is don't give up the long ball. They will take the 10, 15, even 20-yard slants all day long. They just don't want the explosive plays against them, the 45, the 50, the 55-yard bombs from opposing quarterbacks. So Shaq is really somebody I feel like we need to keep an eye on and somebody we're not talking enough about. I'm not sure if you guys remember, it was either last week or the week before, they were rotating Akeem King in at his spot and giving him first team reps and switching Shaq to second team reps. So I don't know, that's a super small sample size of only a couple practices, but I think that's a position to watch, especially with an eye on Shaq. And the second defensive player on a positive light was Poona Ford. I thought he was disruptive all game. I thought he balled out. I thought even the quote today from Pete that said, like, in hindsight, we should have played him a ton more was super revealing. I think when you look at why he fell in the draft, it was mainly due to his height. It's almost like a little Russell Wilson-esque type, draft slide. And as a result, he went undrafted. And he was successful last year for us. He was almost a day one contributor. And, he'll be a pretty big contributor with Jaron Reed being suspended the first 6 games. So yeah, super excited about him.
That's a great one. And I have a tendency to read a lot into a very little from press conferences and little tidbits and sound bites I hear from Pete. But I very keenly remember a press conference midway through last season where someone was asking about Poona Ford, and he had just started sneaking in some snaps, and Pete said something along the lines of that, Clint, the defensive line coach, had really been pushing for him. And the implication was that Pete was the one that had kind of been skeptical based on his height. And I think, knowing where they were in that season and knowing how much that season meant to Pete and his career and how much he put it all on the line last year, firing all the coaches, shit canning all the players pretty much. I don't think he was willing to take the risk. But this isn't the first time that we've seen a player ball out and it take the offseason for Pete and the team to realize that they should play him more. And Frank Clark's the one that recently comes to mind. I mean, he was, as a rookie, was really effective, but was not getting many snaps. At least then you could argue that there were some really good players in front of him. Poona Ford was playing behind Shamar Stephen. It was a really conservative and fear-based decision, I think, to not play Poona last year. That sucks. The plus side is, man, he's looking Pete has in successive press conferences compared him to who's the guy in Tennessee? Jarrell Casey, who he had at USC. Pro Bowl, I think may have been eventually an all-pro level defensive tackle. And then today he compared him to Henry Thomas, who, if I'm not mistaken, is Hall of Fame. Those, and we had Justin Britt say he could be one of the best nose tackles to ever play. It's probably all a little bit ahead of the curve, but I think he had 3 plays last week, or 3 tackles last week. All 3 of them constituted failures for the offense, according to Pro Football Focus. So the guy's a playmaker, and he was robbed of a pretty big fumble force by the goal line.
I was pretty pissed about that. I don't know. I shouldn't care about a preseason game, but I was annoyed about that for a few days.
This guy makes a play, you give him the play. That was absolutely I've never seen forward progress called as stopped when the player's still getting twisted backward. That's when he's still running forward and guys are piling on. That was a really weird call.
I think they hit the 2 deep bombs right after that too.
They did. Think about how we might feel different about this game if they'd gotten that play, scored a touchdown, and we never saw the 2 deep bombs, against those 2 corners. It'd be a very, very different feeling after that game.
And it's unfortunate because I wanted to see the first-team offense get some red zone work. Mm-hmm. They looked pretty good. That was probably the biggest positive of the game.
One thing that you pointed out, Brian, just to go off on a quick tangent, was those horizontal type play action play designs. I'm not an X's and O's guys, but that's not something we saw a ton of last year. And if we see more of that, that's exciting. It's something to watch.
Yeah, to expand on that a little bit for folks that maybe didn't read the morning after article, and I don't know this to be the case, and sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong like everyone else, but my instinct is, I've seen Russell Wilson historically be primarily a vertical route thrower. He throws seams, he throws goes, some comebacks, but crossing routes, there's been some, but really horizontal stretch routes aren't as common in my mind. And in training camp, it's really come out as almost all the tight end routes have been crossing the face of the quarterback. And a lot of them, Russell especially, throwing from right to left, has just been money on those all through training camp, intermediate routes. And in that game, there was a lot of that going on. We saw that with Jerron Brown deep downfield, and the offensive line was blocking well enough for him to be able to those are kind of slow developing plays a lot of times. And I thought that was really nice to see. Brown had 2 catches for 52 yards. He looked like, a guy that you won't be embarrassed to throw out there. Of course, he fooled us last preseason, so who knows? But yeah, I think that was interesting. Did you guys? So Evan, you mentioned, Jeff, do you see that as well, or am I overthinking here?
No, I think a lot of the plays that Russell hit last week, the Jerron Brown crosser, and that looked different. The whole offense looked. I don't know if they were just testing some things in preseason, but I was kind of inspired by how Shoddy was calling that game and how they were attacking on first down. And I might be reading into nothing, but I noticed that too when I was watching the game. They looked a little different, especially from the play actions and the kind of plays they were running.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have this tendency to be high on Russell when people are low, and low on Russell when people are high. And I don't mean it to be. I'm not contrarian specifically, intentionally in that case. But a lot of people were kind of down on the first team offense, and they were kind of saying, hey, Russell missed a couple throws. He missed that throw to Carson. I I think he missed the throw to Jerron Brown. People are saying Jerron Brown should have caught it. Jerron Brown saying he should have caught it. I think that was a high throw. It was not a well-thrown ball. But those were the only two. I mean, I thought he was crisp. I thought he made some really tough throws. I thought he looked in command. I thought he looked on time. He was in the rhythm of the offense. There wasn't a lot of like playground stuff. I thought he looked like a really polished quarterback. So I thought that was a really encouraging performance by him.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw Brian Baldinger, who does those great like 2-minute videos, had a whole video on how good Russell's play actions looked and how good the offensive line pass protected. Even Ethan Posick had a couple finishing blocks where it was really cool to watch just him focus on Russell. And I thought that was for sure the number one. I thought Chris Carson looked great too, but I thought the passing offense was easily the best takeaway from that game. Maybe other than Evan's favorite kicker.
While we're on the topic of the offense, did Precise play?
You know the answer to that question, smartass.
No. Like, I'm being dead serious. I thought he was active for the game.
Physically, he was there.
No. I thought he was like active for the game, and I was like watching for him all game, and he didn't play. So I'm not being sarcastic right now. Like, I actually thought he was active.
I thought that was like a classic troll, but no, he did not play. He was active, I believe, but
he just didn't play.
He didn't play. Carroll said in his press conference today that both McKissick and Preseason will play this week.
Okay.
So I will be really interested to see what those two look like. I feel like both of those guys would have looked better than a lot of the running backs we saw in that game. Although I liked what Travis Homer did. I didn't think he was amazing, but that offensive line was messy. Yeah. And it got messier, and Homer found some room. Rashad Penny did not, and Evan, you happened to end up for people that didn't follow along today. You seem to have a little bit of a conversation with the Penny family. Tell us about that.
Yeah, no. I mean, super respectful dialogue. Like when people tag players or whatever, I typically don't engage, but his brother seemed interested in potentially having a little bit of a conversation. So we talked about Rashad's performance in terms of how, the offensive line was at fault. He was getting tackled in the backfield a lot, which is true. He wasn't getting a lot of room even before the line of scrimmage. There were 2 or 3 plays where he was tackled like 2 to 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, or at least hit. So the offensive line, that second team O-line did not look good. But one thing that I did point out was, we mentioned Travis Homer. Travis Homer, there were several plays where he had defenders. There's one specific play on like the final drive, the last 4 minutes of the game, where they were near the goal line in the red zone, and Travis Homer, he takes the handoff from Paxton Lynch, or no, it's JT Barrett that was in at that play or in that series, and immediately two edge rushers beat their defenders, and they're facing Homer right there, maybe 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And Homer gives them a little shake and bake and makes like 2 to 3 yards, like positive gain out of it. And that was something we really didn't see from Penny, and something I've been wanting to see from Penny. You can't expect him to do a ton when, let's put it this way, running backs are heavily dependent on their offensive lines. Everybody knows this. They have to block for them. When they're getting tackled in the backfield, that's not a good thing. It makes their life super difficult. But what we're seeing from Homer is a little shake and bake that we're not seeing from Penny, and I'd like to see a little bit more of it from Penny. It's like that shiftiness, that ability to juke guys. It's almost like a Madden play, but I would like to see a little more shiftiness from Penny.
Yeah, and there's a scouting term called playing slow. That doesn't mean running slow specifically. That just means looking a step slow and overthinking, and not just playing fast. When you watch like a Tyler Lockett, he looks like he's playing fast all the time. His game speed, his straight line speed, it's very similar. Penny's not a slow runner per se, but he plays slow when nothing's there right away, and that's not a good sign for a running back.
Yeah, it's interesting that the little circle the wagons that happens around Penny for some reason. I don't know exactly why. Like, I'll tell you, I mean, I know I have the reputation of being a Penny hater. I would love for Penny to be great. I why wouldn't I want Penny to be great? I don't care where a player is drafted, what position he plays. All I care about is whether the Seahawks are going to be good. That's all I care about. And so I look at Penny, and if you just objectively look at it, like, the guy had 6 carries for -2 yards. And absolutely, the offensive line in front of him was horrible. I think he could be – it was Marshawn Lynch in there at his prime. Marshawn would have had 6 carries for like 8 yards or something. It wasn't like this was going to be some kind of great performance by some other player. So my point is mainly what Evan is saying, that there are other players. And yes, Elijah, Rashad's brother, was talking to Evan, basically said, hey, the reason Homer got more yards is because he got the toss sweep. Sure, that was one of the plays, and Penny was running up the middle. But the other play that Evan's talking about near the goal line was right up the middle. It was basically a draw play, and Homer made guys miss, and he moved quickly. He was decisive. He found space. Every running back's job in the NFL is to make at least one defender miss, at least one. You should never be tackled by the first guy, ever, no matter if that's in the backfield or 50 yards downfield. And Rashad Penny last year was his first contact tackle rate was not good. Like he went down pretty quickly. He got better. The first game of this preseason, he broke some tackles and looked impressive, was actually shifty. This game, not so good. So I do think that you can't say we can't judge Rashad Penny until he plays with the first string offensive line and then say, yeah, I was really excited about how Travis Homer played. You can't do both. Like, you got to judge a player by the performance they put on the field. And it was interesting hearing Pete Carroll today say, oh, yeah, he's doing fine. I know how to judge running backs, and he's doing fine. All right. Well, I hope that's the case. But, it was not – I don't think it was a particularly promising game for Rashad Penny.
And I want to shift the blame a little bit, to be quite honest with you. My frustration – isn't as like a huge Rashad Penny supporter. Like, I love the dude. I really want him to succeed. I want him to break out. My frustration is not even really with Penny too much. It's the Seahawks. It's the front office. It's the coaching staff that co-signed, drafting a running back in the first round. We've talked about him, for a million years and hours on end. But I think it's reasonable for fans to have high expectations when you draft a running back in the first round. So that's why I think people, including myself, are frustrated with Penny, is because we just want to see a playmaker, somebody who's worth that first-round draft stock. And, Penny didn't draft himself in the first round, so, there's some blame in other areas here.
Yeah, I saw a great Twitter message. It was one of the former scouts on Twitter. He said during the game, he's like, Penny has had amazing college film. I thought he was going to be an amazing pro. And given all the running backs that have come out of the pros in the last 2 years, he looks like a complete bust. And it was hard to disagree with that. Like, it seemed like he had good college film. He was going to be a good player. But if you look at guys like Nick Chubb and some of the guys who went around him, they just look remarkably, even watching Chris Carson. And everyone says running backs don't matter. And I'm closer to that than I ever have before. But just watching the difference between those two guys is remarkably different.
So we're going to take questions as we like to do as often as we can. So we're going to take another topic here, but before we do that, if folks have questions in the chat, this is a good time to start posting them. I think I saw one fly by, and it was related to some of the rumors starting to pop up around maybe Everson Griffin being available. Have any of you guys heard about that or followed what the rumors are?
Yeah, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of this local Seattle radio shows every day, and there's been a lot of Clowney talk lately. I think that was just probably a waste of time. But the name that keeps I know John Clayton's been talking about him a lot on 710 is Everson Griffin, who's the Vikings have some cap troubles coming up. I know Evan was tweeting about their cap situation, his cap a little bit. And Griffin's a guy who probably is making a little too much money for what they have. They have Danielle Hunter also making $14 million, something in that area. So Griffin's a guy who the Seahawks actually wanted to sign if Michael Bennett left in free agency, like back in the day, like 2015. Griffin was their main target. So Clayton believes just the price to acquire him would be a lot lower than someone like Clowney. It'd be like a mid-round pick. In that case, that makes a lot of sense. But again, it could be just much ado about nothing. it more says about the state of Seattle's pass rush than anything else.
Does it say anything about Ansah or no?
I think it just says you don't know what you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have Collier. It sounds like he's going to be out longer than maybe we thought a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Martin, Mingo, and Marsh are fine as like fourth rotational ends and on blitzes, but it looks like they're going to need someone else to really have a great pass rush since their secondary isn't good.
And let me just give the 30-second recap for those of the listeners who missed my tweets on it. Basically, the Vikings. This is Eli 5 explaining like I'm 5, basically. So the Vikings are over 20 mil in the red for 2020. So they're 20 mil over the cap currently projected. Everson Griffin is making like 14 million or something in 2020. Yeah, 13.9 million. So the way this works is they think he'll be a cap casualty regardless. So if the Seahawks gave up like our 4th or 5th round, maybe 6th round pick, they would only be paying his base salary. His signing bonus is already being paid by Minnesota. But one little funky note about his contract is if he plays over 57% of his 2019 snaps or has more than 5 sacks, the rest of the years in his contract are voided. He's currently signed through 2022. So if he has a good 2019, it's a 1-year rental. That's what fans need to know, is that draft pick, if he has a good 2019, he's a 1-year rental.
Well, does a trade trigger anything different there? And usually trades, like you have to all the future, signing bonus gets, accelerated and all that kind of stuff.
He actually had a super small signing bonus, but I know what you're asking. And the question is no, unless like the Seahawks literally take on the contract 1-to-1 word for word, unless there's an adjustment or
I see.
Renegotiation, which there could be.
Yeah. So knowing that's kind of where this is coming from. And I don't know how much you guys followed his challenges last year. He seemed to have some emotional issues. He was out for, I don't know if he played at all last year.
He played 4 games.
He played a few games. Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't really know what you're getting there. And I'm kind of curious, like he obviously was a super productive pass rusher when he was healthy and on the field in the past. Is he a guy that interests either of you?
I'm down to burn money because we have cap space. So I'm down to throw, $100 bills in the fire, but the draft pick has to be like a 5th at the max. Like he's 31 years old. They traded Michael Bennett, for a 5th round pick? I don't think I'd feel comfortable paying more than a 5th round pick.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'm the same way. It all comes down to price for me. I think they do need to get another defensive end in there somehow, but I'm not giving up a 3rd rounder for 1 year of Everson Griffin with all the risks. So, yeah, if it's a 5th rounder, sure, all day. Because you put Ansah and Griffin and all of a sudden Martin and Mingo, that group looks – and then Collier, if he comes back, that group looks a lot deeper. But it all comes down to price.
There's some interesting, again, reading overanalyzing, but reading between the lines. John Clayton, when talking about the Jadeveon Clowney rumors, was initially like, no way, 0 chance, not going to happen, not going to happen, not going to happen. Then he started changing his tune and said, well, yeah, the Seahawks might be in on that. And the last that I heard from someone who was talking to him offline, sent me a picture of the two of them together and a little summary of what they talked about, was that the Seahawks are going to wait till after game 2 to evaluate whether they need to go out and add a pass rusher. And that makes sense to me. Like that it may be a total guess, but it makes some sense. Remember the Seahawks last year reportedly were going to wait until they played the Rams before deciding if they were going to trade Earl Thomas. And they kind of decided that. And of course, Earl got hurt the week before and, the rest is history there. But knowing that Ziggy Ansah may be back for week 1, they could be kind of seeing, okay, what do we have? what do we have with these guys, and let's see just how bad it is before deciding. So I don't know that they feel. I don't personally feel, as a fan, that it's urgent that they go out and get another pass rusher. If there's a great deal that's available to them, sure. I mean, always. But I'm pretty comfortable with the notion of let's wait this out a little bit. The trade deadline's pushed back a little bit than it has been in the past, so they have some time evaluating.
What's the max you would feel comfortable giving up in terms of draft picks, Brian?
Oh, it depends on the player. I think I've gone on record saying I think a second-round pick for Clowney that has the potential to turn into a third-round compensatory pick a year later, 2 years later. Well, no, a year later. I think it's very reasonable, even if he ends up being a one-year rental. I think that's a totally reasonable price to pay. Whether the Texans would do that is a different thing entirely. Griffin, I need to dig into Griffin a little bit more. I'm pretty hesitant about adding someone that you just really don't know what you're going to get. Like, I guess I feel a little bit more comfortable with what we've got in even guys like Mingo and Jacob Martin and Cassius Marsh.
All M's.
Yeah.
Well,
It feels like a little bit of an expensive veteran, not risk, but kind of risk for a team that doesn't feel like they're probably competing for the Super Bowl.
You think the Clowney would be too expensive of a risk for a team
This
that's
doesn't make a whole. I know we went back and forth on this on Twitter the other day, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Like, I think this team is further away than a Clowney from a Super Bowl competing team. I just think there's a lot more roster holes. I think I'd rather keep the second-round pick, to be quite honest.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, I think the other way to look at it is you would end up with Clowney and you'd end up with Ansah in this situation. And they're two veteran, high-quality pass rushers that have some question marks. And if it works out, one of them could end up being your next Cliff Averill that you do sign to a longer-term deal and keep around for a little while longer. It's possible. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a rental, although it probably would be. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that – there's one thing about what you would do. There's another thing about what you're going to do if you're the coach and the GM of this team. I don't know that you're going to look at this and say, we're not really good enough, so let's not get better. Like, let's not do that. If the question was, would you be a better team with Jadeveon Clowney on your team this year and have better chances to win? Is the answer yes or no?
Yes, it is. But then you have
I think it's pretty clear.
Well, that's where coaches and GMs that's where finding the middle ground is tough, because the GM always has to have the big picture and the long-term thinking. And John, I think with the new owner, is going to be around for a while. Pete's in his last years, so it's interesting to know who's kind of making the call there and what their time frame really is.
Yeah, is this Pete's last year?
No. He
signed that
extended.
Yeah,
through 21. Through 21.
Yeah, probably got 3 more years.
Yeah,
including this year. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. Nothing will probably happen, but I think that's kind of where I'm at there. So there was another question about Collier, and there was some news today. Not much of an update. Jeff, did you hear the press conference? Do you want to give an update on what?
Yeah. So they said Collier's kind of mostly week to week at this point. Where they said the same thing with DK, where Collier's he's starting to move a little bit, and he's starting to go through some drills inside the facility, but he's not able to change direction and turn on his. It wasn't a high ankle sprain; it was a different kind of injury. So those are more routine, 4 to 6 week injury. This one's more of a unique situation. So it's going to be a while. It's probably going to go beyond week 1, but he's starting to come around. But if he's not ready to change direction, that's really important for a defensive lineman. So they're probably going to ease him in. It could be week 3 or week 4.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. But that means they're going to have to carry him on the roster too. If they put him on IR, he'd have to be a guy that is IR, can be recalled later. But Yeah, that does not seem like he's going to be ready. Another guy in a similar category that they're going to have to make a call about is Phil Haynes. We'll talk about offensive line depth here in a second. I want to get to one of the questions in the chat, but they also mentioned Phil Haynes is racing to try to get back for the beginning of the season, and Pete Carroll sounded pretty skeptical of that. And so I think it's looking increasingly like Haynes could be on PUP. He's already on PUP, so he's one of the few guys where they could put into that designation, which would give him 6 weeks and give them a roster spot. But man, that's going to be a tough call too. They're really thin at guard. They just signed a tackle and a guard today. They had to put Posick back in last week after Demetrius Knox got hurt, and Posick's not even he's the backup of for a guy. So Upati's hurt. So they've got some challenges there, and if they have to keep Haynes and Collier, 2 guys that can't play on the roster that might not be able to play for first few weeks, that's kind of tough.
I think Haynes is an obvious PUP guy. I think that way you can store some depth for one of those spots, kind of develop him, because he hasn't practiced all training camp. He's going to need some time to get his legs under him.
You would think so.
And he would be inactive probably for the games anyway, so you might as well PUP him. It just sucks that Upati doesn't sound like he'll be ready for week 1 either.
Yeah, it's confusing. It's not clear based on what Pete Carroll said, and we'll see where that goes. So questions
were interesting. Did you hear what he said about him?
I did, I think. But what maybe
I found it interesting. He was like, Posick's playing great, but as soon as Upati comes back, he's playing. I don't care. There's no competition.
I see. You're talking about how he's talking about Posick. Yeah,
I found that interesting.
I don't think that Posick is particularly well thought of in that coaching staff. I mean, I think part of it is Posick is not a super strong lineman, especially on the run. He's a good pass blocker. He's better than average, but
fuck you, Tom Cable. Sorry, continue.
I think you should put some of that FU towards your boy John Schneider, because Ethan Posick was one of the only offensive linemen drafted during the Cable era that Cable did not scout. They were very clear about that. And it seemed like that was this turning of the page where Schneider finally had decided, oh yeah, I realized that Cable is terrible and toxic on personnel, so I'm going to do it. And he ended up drafting Posick.
Sometimes even the best people make mistakes, Brian.
Uh-huh.
The 2017 Seahawks draft is the most frustrating thing. And that's including Petty. If Shaq, and now that Shaq was like one of their prize guys in that class, and Tedrick went like 1 pick before Eddie Jackson, and Juju went 1 pick after Posick, it's the most frustrating. Don't look at that. Any Seahawks fan, it's incredible. It'll go crazy.
All right, there is a question from Colin Lundstrom in our chat. His question is, what is the status of Naz Jones? Do we think he gets cut in favor of Meter and or Quentin Jefferson?
What a weird career arc. I know we've talked about it, but something is going on behind the scenes here. He messed with Pete Carroll's spiritual juju. Something's wrong. I could absolutely see him being cut. I don't think he's a lock at all. Which is weird because I feel like he's talented.
Yeah, Jeff. I mean, Pete was pretty clear in the press conference today. Naz has got some sort of knee issue. It sounds like there might be some kind of work being done. He called it tendonitis, but says that wasn't technically what it was. He's barely been playing. He's low on the depth chart. He was in the doghouse last year. If he makes it, it would be one of the all-time head scratchers. So I haven't expected him to make it for quite some time, and nothing's changed for me there.
I was going to say, who? When was the last time we've seen Naz Jones?
Yeah,
I have been Evans Ray. I don't know what the hell happened that year in 2017. He was one of the bright spots of that draft class, and his career has gone down the tubes. Like I don't think there's a chance he makes the team.
Yeah, good question. I think. I expect Quentin Jefferson to make the team. I do not expect Meter to make the team at this point. So I've got to do my next 53 and look there. I know that Preseason will not be on my next 53, so Evan will be happy about that. But
well, that's an obvious one.
Yeah, but I think receivers, the other one, guys, that still is just going to be really tough. Gary Jennings did nothing. And I think you got it. Malik Turner, he was ahead of all of the guys that everybody talks about in the rotation. He was playing with the ones. Mm-hmm. And he does contribute on special teams. So I still think Malik Turner is going to make the roster, and I think it's one other guy out of the rest. And I had to guess before the game, I would have said it was Jennings, just based on that one practice was probably good enough to make them feel like they want to keep him around. But now, like, I think Ursua is the guy that has got to be the leader in the clubhouse for that 6th receiver. It's definitely not Jazz Ferguson.
And you can't cut him. You can't cut Ursua. If you cut him, he's gone. End of story.
I know you want Ursua, Evan. Where are you at, Jeff?
I find it tough with Jennings because I don't know how you can evaluate him. He only played with second team last week, and the second team left tackle had an absolutely abysmal game. You couldn't even run a play. So you couldn't evaluate receivers at all. I think it was a mistake by the Seahawks not giving him some first team snaps, because I think that's a much better way to evaluate him, because he's not going to play with Paxton Lynch or Gino or whatever. So I need to see more. I think Ursua is more unique, as we talked about a lot. So I think Ursua will make the team just because they need another slot guy. But if they keep 6 guys, and DK is not going to be playing for a bit, maybe that does bring Jazz Ferguson in the mix if he gets better the next couple weeks. And it seemed like Turner, you've been the only one on Turner, but last week he was the one playing with the ones, and he was the 4th guy up since Metcalf didn't play. David Moore's been a little quiet, and people talk about him a lot.
Yeah, but everybody wants to say that David Moore's going to get cut.
No.
That is a fan call if I've ever seen one. It's just not going to happen.
I'm with you both. I think Ursua makes the team.
Interesting. So a good question here from Niels Toy 01. He says, what makes a Super Bowl contender, and what are the Seahawks missing as part of that? Obviously, that's a very, you can go very deep on that question, but at a high level, Evan, you're like, hey, they're not a Super Bowl contender this year. What are they missing that would make them a Super Bowl contender?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. But the first thing that comes to my mind are playmakers. Defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball, special teams. Outside of Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, I just don't think they have enough playmakers. Marquise Blair has looked good. Of course, Cody Barton is looking good as a rookie, but there's just no dynamic playmaking talent beyond those 2 players that you can count on for every single game. There's just not those blue chip elite players on this squad.
So you don't think that Tyler Lockett is a playmaker? You don't think Poona Ford is a playmaker? You don't think Dwayne Brown? You don't think that
I'm thinking
Michael
like
Kendricks?
I'm thinking like touchdown scoring, turnover causing playmakers. Players that either score touchdown, you know what I mean, like put points on the board, like physically. I don't even know if I would consider any of those players like in the same category as Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson, though.
Well, you're talking about 2 of the best players in the NFL, right? So that's a high.
But that's what you need to win the Super Bowl. I think you have to have an abundance of playmakers.
Got it. How about you?
If you real quick, if you look back to like Super Bowl 48, look, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, all top 5 at their position. Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright, both probably top 5 at their position. On the defensive line, like Red Bryant, like Chris Clemens, like Michael Bennett, like Cliff Avery, like that's playmaking talent.
Sure, that is the most talented team of the decade.
Yeah, I think I don't think we can compare. That's the best team in the last 15 years.
Sure, but I think my answer is a lack of playmaking talent.
Yeah, I hear you. I get it. Jeff, what's the biggest gap between this team being able to contend for a Super Bowl and what they currently have in your mind?
I'd say having just elite strength. Defensively, their linebackers are good. They're probably the best in the league, but they have weaknesses in 2 of the 3 important areas. Offense, we think they can be great as a play action. We know they'll be okay at running, but we don't know how. They're not elite at anything. I think they're very good at a lot of things. Russell Wilson's a great quarterback. But if you look at someone like the Rams, they have an elite offense. The Eagles have an elite offensive line, and that makes their offense great. The Patriots have the best quarterback of all time and the best coach of all time. The Seahawks are very good in a lot of areas, which is why I think they're a 10-win team. But they're not really elite at anything. And that kind of goes into what Evan says about great players. In 2013 and 2014, their defense was historically good. 2015, they were historically good. They were an elite defense. Denver Broncos, with a terrible broken quarterback, won the Super Bowl with an elite defense. Mm-hmm. Most teams win now with elite offenses. The Seahawks have potential to be a very good offense, but they lost Earl, they lost Doug. I don't know if they're elite at anything.
Yeah, I mean, in my research around Super Bowl teams, I mean, I think it's related to what both you guys are saying. Generally, a Super Bowl team is going to have at least 2 and generally 3 All-Pro players, at least. I think the Seahawks have 2, and the guys that we mentioned with Bobby and Russell, potentially. Russell has not been an All-Pro yet in his career, believe it or not. But I think he could take the next step to be one of the, top 4 QBs, top 2 QBs in the NFL this year. That's possible. And then I don't know that they've got a third. Poona Ford, maybe. How's
Dwayne
that?
Brown. I'd say Dwayne Brown.
Dwayne Brown?
Dwayne Brown was an elite player last year.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they've got some of that. And generally Super Bowl teams will have 7 to 8 Pro Bowl players. At least on their roster. Often they'll have more than that, but I don't know that they've got those guys there yet in enough spots. So I think DK Metcalf is a potential blue chip player that they've added, and I don't know that he's going to become a blue chipper this year, but he could become a big factor. I think Tyler Lockett's right there, and is still underappreciated. And, I think that people are still sleeping on guys like Will Dissly. We don't know exactly what we're getting there. I think they're sleeping on Chris Carson. I think Chris Carson could easily be a top 5 back in the NFL this year. And I do think this offense overall, people forget it was, 5th or 6th scoring offense last year in the NFL, second best scoring team in team history, I think. I think they're better this year than they were last year on offense. I think they're meaningfully better. So could this be a team that scores 28 points a game? I think it could be. And I think does not mean I think they're a Super Bowl contender, but I think that it's not unrealistic to think I'm probably closer right now to thinking this team could win 11 games than I am to thinking that they're going to win 10 based on what I'm seeing. The other thing I'd add there is depth. That's another area they're thin. They do not have the guys behind the guys behind the guys the way that they've had in the past. And it's a war of attrition out there. So guys get hurt. All right. Someone's mentioned Michael Dixon is definitely an all-pro player. So
they're elite at punting.
Yeah. And then we'll probably maybe elite at kicking this year. Thanks for Evan. But let's talk about nickel corner for a second, because that's one of the battles that we've all been keenly watching, and we've all got our favorites and different guys that have been involved. But Pete Carroll today said something I've been kind of waiting for him to say for a while. He said Jamar Taylor is going to start at nickel this weekend, and he's was his quoted word, earned that chance. I think that he's a 7 or 8 year vet, so the team would rather see a young player grab that spot, like a Kalen Reed or like King, or even Ugo Amadi. But Taylor has been clearly the best nickel corner during the practices. Before I ask you guys what your thoughts are there, I am going to ask you: do you have any idea of how many times, if Akeem King was targeted 5 times in the game last week, do you have any idea how many times the ball was completed, thrown his direction?
1.
1. How about you, Jeff?
I'd say 5.
Yeah.
What?
The Vikings were 5 for 5 passing against Akeem King for
might have been the worst player in the field.
7.
Holy hell! How did I miss that?
Yeah, he had in Pro Football Focus, he had the worst coverage grade of any player on the roster. It was 28.9. I haven't seen a coverage grade that low in a long time. And I bet if I went out and looked at all the players over week 2, that's probably one of the bottom 5 grades for a cornerback in the NFL for that preseason week. So Kim King went from being the highest graded player in week 1 for the Seahawks to one of the lowest in the league. So he's opened the door. Where are you guys at on the nickel spot? Evan, what do you want to see happen there?
Ugo Amadi is somebody that we should definitely be watching. Pete absolutely raved about him today. I'm not sure if you guys saw the quote. It was, let me see if I can pull it up, but basically he said, like, he's a super exciting player for us. Every single time he's on the field, he does something excellent or something like that. He's done something every time he's been on the field. He's been a really exciting player for us. That could be, what maybe your starting nickel corner. I think he's going to be competing with Jamar Taylor for that spot, and that's a good competition to have there. I think Amadi at this point is a lock for the roster, especially when you consider like his special teams contributions. Like everybody saw the big hit he laid on that that Viking punt returner. I think he's versatile and he's exciting. It's a competition to definitely watch.
Jeff, where are you?
Yeah, and my first thought today, just saying, we haven't talked enough about Jamar Taylor on the show. We talked about King and Kalen Reed, and even I think Boykins was a guy we spent a lot of time on early in training camp. But Jamar Taylor was like a high draft pick a couple years ago, 2nd-round pick. I think he's 28 years old or 29 years old. He's a 4.4 guy or 4.39 guy. Like he's an interesting prospect. He's not like a run-of-the-mill like Marcus Trufant at the end of his career trying to play nickel corner. He has like some pretty good skill. He's bounced around the league more as an outside guy, but inside he's actually done a lot better. So he's actually an interesting player as kind of a stopgap. I'm like Evan. I want to see Amadi win that job. I remember after the first preseason game, our show, I couldn't stop like raving about Amadi. His game speed looked, to me, it jumped off the page. There was so much talk after they drafted him about how his 40 time was too slow to be a corner, or a couple other things about his film. But I know Will, who's an Oregon guy, he loved Amadi, and watching him kind of step forward when all those like hype trains slowed down, that really made me excited. That hit on special teams was like everyone in the league was talking about that. Jeff Schwartz tweeted that out, and from an upside perspective and from a fun perspective, I'm really hoping Amadi gets that job. I want to see more young guys on the field with big upsides. But if you have to start Jamar Taylor as Amadi kind of gets his feet wet, I think that's a pretty good transition plan, and you can kind of have those two battle it out. It doesn't seem like Akeem King is a good fit for that role at all. He was getting burned by second-tier players, like guys who were in the CFL last year. And I don't know what Kalen Reed does. I don't know much about him. I'm not going to lie. But I think those two are much more intriguing to me than the guys we probably initially thought this job would go to.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wanted to see Amadi take that role, and the team's really made it tough on him in a lot of ways. They've asked him to play free safety. And he's played the bulk of his time there. He really hasn't gotten as many reps at nickel. It's going to be hard for him to win that role, at least out of camp. And he's making plays. He's going to make the roster, no doubt about that. He's a lock. I think he probably starts as a special teamer, and I think Jamar Taylor probably holds on to that spot as a starter going into the season. And then hopefully that flips as time goes on. But, there's a lot of question marks there. I thought Trey Flowers, besides the fact that he gave up that 45-yard pass interference, was actually in good position to make a play there. I think that you can feel somewhat like maybe that's a decent sign. It's not a terrible sign. and he's not getting just trashed out there. But that Shaquille Griffin play was pretty concerning, and we'll see. I think they're going to get more. They're going to get more reps this week. It says a lot that the team's been playing Flowers and Griffin well into like past when all the other starters are coming out. So I think that they don't yet feel like those guys have arrived at all. And on one hand, it's good that they're doing that. On the other hand, it's troubling that they feel like they have to do that. So there's no doubt at all that the biggest question mark on this team is the secondary. I mean, I think it's a bigger question mark than the pass rush, and I thought that was going to be the biggest question mark going into this year. So I don't know what you guys thought. I thought Markevius Mingo, Cassius Marsh, Jacob Martin again looked like they did okay.
Yeah, the pass rush was fine. It was surprisingly, I think, decent.
So offensive line we talked about a little bit. I do want to get your guys' take on what you think is going to play out there. So just to summarize for folks, Upati's been out for weeks. Do not know when he's going to get back. Ethan Posick's been stepping in for him at left guard. George Fant is out. Do not know when he's going to get back. They're hoping maybe week 1, but we don't know. So that's a guard and a tackle. Well, tight end / tackle. Phil Haynes, your 4th-round pick, who is your next in line at guard. He's out, probably going to be on PUP. Jamarco Jones, who's your other tackle backup, was out last week. I think they're hoping he's going to be back this week, but we don't know. And then you lost Demetrius Knox last week, who was a backup rookie guard, not going to make the roster. But, I mean, where are you? Like, besides the obvious top 4, or top 5 in this case, if you count Posick. So Dwayne Brown, Posick, Britt, Fluker, and Ifedi. Set them aside for a second. Who are the guys behind those guys that are healthy that you'd be comfortable coming into a game? Would it help if I read some names so you guys knew who's on that list?
Probably.
I mean, that's how it is, right? I mean,
it's that bad that I'm struggling to remember names.
Yeah. So, I mean, they just signed Brian Wallace at tackle. I'm guessing he's not a name you're going to feel too comfortable with. Joey Hunt, I think his chances improve. He can play guard or center, and he has played. So
I love how that's like the standard. He may have played football once, occasionally, has a pulse.
You've got Marcus Martin, who has played guard and he's been a center, and he played tackle in this game because he had to. He's certainly not a tackle. But Jordan Roos. Jordan Simmons is also on that list of injuries. He's not out, so that's 3 guards that are out. Landon Turner's a guy that they signed today. Who else? Elijah Nkansa's the guy that got just trashed last week. I mean, he was not good. Not good. It's pretty thin, guys. I mean, any of those names, you're like, oh, yeah, if they had to play him for a game, we'd be okay.
Hell no. And if I'm John Schneider, I'm exploring the guard trade market. That's what I'm doing, because that position group is a problem.
Yeah, it feels like that's a decent chance for trade for depth. I just don't know. I mean, have we heard anything on Jordan Simmons and whether he's coming back? Jeff, have you heard anything there?
Yeah, Pete talked about him a little last week. It just didn't seem like he was close to coming back. It sounded like he had more work done in the offseason, and durability has been the story of his college career. That's why Oakland got rid of him. It doesn't seem like he might be an IR guy for this year, but it's unfortunate.
He just had another knee surgery.
Yeah, so I don't think he's ready to play anytime soon. Marcus Martin's a guy who has played in the NFL before as a guard. He had to play tackle last week. He might make the team, or he might be around as a call-up guy, but Ethan Posick might get a lot of playing time to start the season. and we better prepare ourselves for that because not good. And
Yeah.
I'd like to see Jamarco Jones come back. The drop off between him and I don't know how to say that guy's name.
Konsa.
Yeah, who played left tackle last week is dramatically different because Fant's down right now. They're down on some very good backups. They looked like they had a deep offensive line coming into the year with Simmons and Haynes and Posick seemed like he'd moved to center. And Jamarco Jones and Fant. That looked like a really good backup group, and almost all those guys are gone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an issue, guys. And there's been some years where the offensive line just plays the same play every game, and you just kind of forget about it. It's like, oh yeah, those guys are just rock solid. And then there's other years where guys go down regularly, and this year, if they have any more guys go down, they're going to be really struggling to field a functioning offense. And if the offense is going to have trouble because the offensive line is really struggling, then you're starting to look at some challenges. So this is a pretty big deal in terms of the dominoes and the structure of this team. The offensive line being good is pretty damn important if you want this team to make the playoffs. So I think this is one to watch. I think Posick's been okay. I think Upati, this was the big concern with them deciding that was going to be the guy they signed. You go Upati and you go Fluker, you're going to be very fortunate if both of them play more than 13 games. That would be super fortunate. So you need guys like Jordan Simmons. You need guys like Posick behind them. You need other players. And I think George Fant becomes pretty important too, because there may be a situation where you need to slide a Fetty inside and have him play guard and have Fant play tackle. But you don't have that option without having somebody that can play tackle for you reliably. Not that a Fetty's the best at that role either. So that's one to watch. I think those are the main storylines, I guess, going into this final week as we start to wrap up here. I mean, what are the things typically the way that the team does these third preseason games is the starters play into the third quarter. They come out after halftime, they play one series. Do you think they're going to do that? Is my first question. Do you think they're going to do what they've done in the past, or do you think they're going to, be more conservative and not play them into the third quarter? So let's start there. Jeff, what's your expectation?
Yeah, it's tricky because they've managed this preseason very differently than they have in the past. And I don't know if they're going to want to either build on what Russell did last week and give him a half like they usually do, or maybe they want to rest him a bit. It's tough to tell. So I think defensively they're still trying to figure out who they are and who's going to play in the key roles similar to the first game. I think they're going to play their starters, maybe not like a Bobby or a KJ, but I think the rest of the guys, maybe not McDougald or Jaron Reed, but the rest of the guys need work. They got to figure out roles. They got to figure out their pass rush rotations. They got to figure out safeties, the corners. I think they might play into the third quarter with their starters defensively. Offensively, I don't think they're going to play Carson much. I don't think they might have to play their starting O-line more than they want to, but it's tricky. They've changed their entire structure of how they run things with the new strength and conditioning guys. So I don't know.
I don't want to see Tyler Lockett. I don't want to see Chris Carson. I want to see the battle of the wide receiver group. I want to see each of those guys at the bottom of that group get a good amount of reps. I want to see those battles turn out and see who really, stands above the rest. I want to see how Penny does. I want to see how Travis Homer does. I don't need to see those guys, our starters into, 3 quarters in. It'd be nice to maybe get them a quarter and a half, but, the whole Marquise Blair and DK Metcalf scares kind of shook me up a little bit. So I think there's a balance here, and I don't think it needs to go the full 3 quarters through.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am on this. It's interesting. Usually I'm let's get them into the third quarter, but at least on offense, I feel like that's flopped. The way Russell played in this last game, I saw enough. I was like, all right, he's in good shape. I'd like to see him play a full quarter and, get at least 2 or 3 series in, but I would be perfectly fine having Geno Smith come in the second quarter. After if Russell, let's say Russell gets like a touchdown or two, and I don't know that I need to see much more than that. Chris Carson's another one, a great call out there. I really need to see Chris Carson running behind the number one line? Not really. Marshawn Lynch went whole preseasons without basically getting any snaps or just getting a couple. Give him that treatment. Let him have a series, get a couple carries, save his body for the regular season. Let's see what Rashad Penny does with the top line and see what you got. McKissick, you got Procise, you got these other guys, Homer that are going to play. So I think that's great. And rotating the receivers is a really great idea. So it's weird. I feel differently this year than I have in the past. I absolutely would like to see them rotate those other guys in and evaluate them. I think those are the tougher decisions to make. And I think seeing those players against top, like the opponent's number ones, are going to tell you a lot more and hopefully make better decisions about who you keep and who you cut. So yeah, I want to watch Poona play, but I'd also I'm ready for him to take a seat because God, if Poona Ford went down, then we're really thin at defensive line as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it as much as how people play. And then we've got the fourth game to go still, and man, it's crawling, guys. It's crawling. I'm ready for real games. I think we largely know what this team is going to look like, and as it stands right now, I think this team is going to be one of the better offenses in the NFL. They're going to be one of the better special teams in the NFL. And they are probably middle of the pack defense. They were middle of the pack defense last year. I think it's reasonable to expect they're going to be not worse than they were last year. So yeah, I don't know how much more we have to learn in the preseason to figure that out, but I guess we're going to find out anyway.
Who do we play this Saturday?
The
Chargers.
Not San Diego Chargers. Yeah, without Derwin James, unfortunately. That guy sad to hear he's out for a while.
No Melvin Gordon.
Or Gordon, that's right. All right, so let's wrap it there. I do want to take a minute to really thank our sponsors. And Burgermaster, drove by Burgermaster up near Mill Creek. I was playing golf up there today this weekend, and great Burgermaster spot there. Is Burgermaster down as you're going by, what is it, 520?
Yeah.
And great driving place, fun place to eat. They've been a great sponsor for us and really good burger. So good shakes, highly recommend. I want to give Blake over at Manifest Fit a big shout out. So that's I think it's Viva La Blake on Twitter. You should totally shout him out. He's a really solid guy. Does personal training and does it for everybody. He is kind of sick of the fact that the only people that get to have personal trainers are rich people that have a ton of money, and he's trying to make it accessible to all sorts of people and people that maybe don't want to go to a gym. Either they can't afford a gym or they don't want to be seen at a gym. And so, he does it. He can do it over the web. He does it online. He texts with people. He sends them workouts. He FaceTimes with them. He works around their schedule, and really good guy. Great trainer. So head over to manifestfit.com if you haven't already. Check them out. We're starting football season, guys. I had pizza tonight. It was not a good choice for the waistline. So
what pizza? That's the real important question of this podcast.
Well, do we have a pizza sponsor right now? In all due respect to Pagliacci, who I'm super fond of Pagliacci, tonight we went Zeke's. Why
didn't you go Papa Murphy's, which is far superior? I will not tolerate Papa Murphy's hate on this podcast.
Papa Murphy is just plain mediocre. It is not that good. And if you compare that to Zeke's, then I don't know that we have much more to talk about. I mean, that's
a horrendous take. I just want you to know that.
The only criticism you can have of Zeke's is that it's expensive. That's the only criticism. It's so good. Have you ever and see the things that that Zeke's has are things you probably wouldn't like because they involve things that aren't like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Evan Hawley in the chat. Papa Murphy's is the undisputed champ.
He has your name. I think that's highly suspect.
He has 2 first names, and I never trust people with 2 first names. So you have a point.
Yeah, but anyway, point being, I make a lot of bad food decisions during football season. Personal training, exercise, now's the time. Days are going to get shorter. Now's the time to get in your workout routine. Go to manifestfit.com. And then, finally, absolutely, if you haven't already, this is an interesting time to be looking at houses, whether you're looking at them for yourself or as an investment, with what's going on with the economy and what's going on with the interest rates. Go over and talk to John Hurlbut at Altitude Homes. Does a great thing where actually he will donate $500 of any closing costs to Ben's fund if they get referred from Hawk Blogger. So definitely check them out at Altitude Homes for any of the real estate stuff you're doing. So shout out to them. Please, if you haven't already, give us a review. Subscribe here on YouTube if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up. And if you are not a patron, please, patreon.com/hawkblogger. I see Colin Lundstrom, thank you so much, made a donation in the super chat. It's that easy. He dropped some money in there. That's super helpful. And we will continue to look for ways to invest in the show and make it better. Trying to figure out how to get the fellas backdrops that are as cool as mine, but so far it's not pretty. Not pretty when that happens. So we're gonna work on that and figure that soon. With all that said, thank you all for tuning in. It's been fun. Are we doing a post-game show this weekend, Evan?
We are. So everybody that's listening, like 5 to 10 minutes, basically near the end of the fourth quarter, we'll tweet out links. We'll do a post-game reaction show, Q&A, all that stuff, rant. We'll have fun.
Cool. And news breaking, we have some new folks who are going to be joining the pod from now and then. Ashley Ryan is one person who's going to join. She's hopefully been listening tonight. She couldn't join tonight, but maybe we'll have her on next week. And there's some other folks we're talking to. We'll let you know. But we're going to kind of mix and match, and we'll start bringing in some guests as well. So lots of good stuff ahead. Hope everybody has a great Wednesday night, and go Hawks.